Energy Transition, episode 70. Our topic today is BlackRock CEO ashamed to be part of ESG debate. With Irene Slav, Temi Nimet, David Blackon, and me, Armando Cavanha. Good morning to all.
Good morning.
Good day.
And good day.
Yeah, good day. Please let me share some interesting statements. This is the first one. I won't say ESG anymore. Yeah. Now focusing on goals other than ESG. Wow. First, retiring ESG as an investing term. Fink doesn't want to use the term ESG anymore. Moment for right wing.
Right.
And this guy, the last screen, ESG is like a cancer. Wow. So, after all, is ESG dead, Irina Slav?
I think it has been overused as a word, as an abbreviation. And, people have had enough of it as such, especially since I've been seeing criticism of using this ESG as motivation for investment decisions and an over focus on the environmental part of it, so whereas social and governance. Interestingly, these criticisms have coincided with more talk about the social cost of the transition and the emergence of the concept of a just transition, to slide the social back into focus. But yeah, I think it's just outlived its usefulness as a weapon in the energy transition crusade. So I think that's why he's not going to use it anymore, because he said that BlackRock will continue to be environmentally responsible and push its clients to reduce their carbon footprint. So nothing is changing practically. What he said, what Fink said, basically, as I understood it, is that he will just no longer use the term ESG. That's all, because a buzzword gets overused. You better drop it before it loses any meaning.
Yeah,
David.
it's rebranding. It's rebranding.
Yeah.
That's I just put a link in the private chat. Armando, maybe you want to put that up elsewhere. But Time Magazine ran an article a couple of days ago talking about Fink's comments. And they said, whoa, before you conservatives start getting all excited that ESG has gone down the sinkhole, it said, and I'm quoting here, in other words, Fink isn't changing the firm's practices. He's just changing the way he talks about them.
Right.
So one of the new rebranding phrases they're using is conscientious capitalism, or maybe decarbonization and social and governance. I mean, it's it's just too funny.
Thing?
Yeah, it's that one. Yeah, exactly. So you've got them. They're getting a bad rap, and this happened also with the term socialist. So when socialism became a bad word, they changed it to liberal. When liberal got to be taken as a bad word, they changed it to progressive. And now that progressive is kind of turning into a bad word, I'm sure they're going to go back to being liberal or leftist or something else. But that is par for the course, where when the word or the terminology starts to elicit that negative feeling, then it's time for a rebrand. And that's what Larry Fink is saying. We got to rebrand it. We got to use a different word, because the people are getting onto us. They're getting onto what he really is. So we got to change the framework, change the vocabulary.
I love the conscientious capitalism.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Whatever happened, I just can't help wondering whatever happened to fiduciary responsibility. I mean, that's always been the principle. these big investment firms have operated on. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their investors to maximize the returns on their investments. And they're trying, and of course, they've been trying to displace that for 15 years now with, well, I guess, conscientious investing now, which is just ESG, as you say, rebranded. And this is so classic of the political left. They never abandon what they're pursuing. They just talk about it differently to try to fool you again with different terminology. And, in that same interview that Fink did at the Aspen conference, which is a gathering of left wingers from all over the world every year. He he basically said, yeah, I'm getting rid of this term ESG, but we're still going to be focusing on social and governance and environmental. And so it's like, okay, well, even he admits it, right? There's no change here other than how you talk about it. And this is a philosophy that in the United States, of course, in the Soviet Union, it's how communism has always worked, right? And still works wherever communist governments exist. It was brought to the Democratic Party in the early 1990s, this philosophy of always doubling down on the same stuff but talking about it differently was brought to the Democratic Party in the United States in 1992 by the Clintons, and is still the overriding principle for the Democratic Party here in the United States. So Larry Fink's a Democrat. He thinks like a Democrat. He talks like a Democrat, and he runs his company like a Democrat. And so no one, I totally agree with Time, that no one should think ESG is going away in any real sense, other than how they talk about ESG is probably going to change. And I guess for the ratings companies like S&P Global, who do the metrics for ESG company by company and put out the rankings every year, that means S&P Global and the other companies that do this are probably going to have to change their terminology too, or they'll be canceled by the woke left for talking about things wrong. And it's just part of the societal insanity we're all dealing with, not just in the United States, but all over the Western world.
Let me put on the screen through people talking to us.
That's not really a relevant comment. I'm afraid.
Well, I hope you do get opportunities to deploy your welding expertise. I actually worked as a welder's helper in the oil patch in 1976 and 77. So you have my support anyway. I wish I could help you find ways to deploy it.
Can I just say what I find most ironic about all this? That the head of the biggest asset manager in the world is talking about progressive ideas and practices, but what they're doing is not helping poor people live better. They're actually going to make poor people even poorer and relatively well-off people poorer, which is a betrayal of the original idea of, socialist movements. And nobody seems to notice it.
Right. You could say that the mistake was put all these three concepts together. If they run separately, is good.
No, the mistake was overusing the term. And like Tammy said, people are getting onto them because there's a lot of talk, but no good decisions that would actually make life better for more people, which is what the left has been promising for decades.
Yeah.
And this ESG is just a mask to, attract a new sort of investors or whatever.
Yeah, but the concepts are still important. So social environment is still important.
Sure.
Every business, yeah.
Right, and every business should be striving to meet goals internally like that as they're relevant to their own organization. Certainly, oil and gas companies should be working to cut emissions, clean up what they do. And the truth is that the oil and gas industry has cleaned up its operations immeasurably over the last, since I've been involved in it. My goodness, you wouldn't even recognize the industry as it existed in the 1970s when I first started working in it. It simply doesn't exist anywhere on earth today because those companies have worked so hard to change their practices out of concern for the environment. The same thing with hiring practices, and the same thing with governance, to ensure you have the right, bonus system and compensation systems that provide the proper incentives within your companies. All companies should be working to do those things. But investment houses like BlackRock and Vanguard and all these ESG focused firms have attracted a backlash now politically. And in the United States, one thing Larry Fink is very concerned about is the backlash from attorneys general and governors in states governed by Republicans, like Texas, which passed a law 2 years ago that gives our state comptroller the right to blacklist these investment houses who discriminate against oil and gas and other energy companies that do business in Texas by denying them capital for their operations. And there is no question, despite BlackRock's protest to the contrary, that BlackRock and all those other investment houses have done that. They have engaged in a discriminatory practice against all fossil fuel investments for years now. And that's one thing Larry Fink is very concerned about. And so he's going to not change what he's doing, but he's going to talk about it differently and hope that deflects some of this criticism that's coming his way.
Tammy, could we suppose that Mr. Fink is less rich after these statements?
No, I doubt it. But it depends. I mean, if they hold a lot of shares in Siemens Gamesa, which is just, plummeted.
I'm sure they do.
Right? And some of these other things, and it's kind of linked to what David's been writing about the past few days on his energy absurdities, because on the one hand, they're encouraging all this investment in renewables. And honestly, ESG is meant, and it's being designed to shift that investment away from hydrocarbon companies to renewables, whether it most predominantly wind, but also solar. So if you're shifting that investment and you're trying to push investors and pension funds, particularly the institutional investors, to do this, then they take that money out of hydrocarbon companies and they put it into wind and solar. But now you have the EU and the White House researching geoengineering, blocking out the sun. So they're going to spend money, taxpayer money, and push investment into solar panel companies, and then make the sun dimmer. To block out the sun. It's stupid. But I want to just kind of link this to what happened last week, which was the launch of the International Sustainability Standards Board, Sustainability and Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And those are the first two of a proposed 5 set of basically ESG. So I can totally see, now that the ISSB has launched their new disclosures, that they want to change the terminology to sustainability and or something similar, because then they can say, oh, well, look, the ISSB is doing it. All these countries are jumping on board. So therefore, we should change the terminology to accommodate that new global language. And I mean, these standards are very much designed to kill the fossil fuel industry, to starve it of funding, and to make things shift over to where the central planners have decided is the best option for people. And unfortunately, there's all of these pension funds that have loads of money and they're looking to put it somewhere. And I really fear for the pension funds of Western countries that are doing this, because they're going to be pushed into these really nascent industries to some extent and subsidized industries, but they don't have a long-term value, I don't think. So I don't know what's going to happen to people's pensions down the road.
Yeah, it is risky. And there's another thing. Sorry, Armando. There have been studies proving that returns for investors from ESG-focused funds are not better than non-ESG focused funds.
That's a good point.
The truth is beginning to surface. So it's time to drop the ESG and, rebrand it as sustainability, as Tammy said.
So, Irina, do you expect that they can invent another term and put different variables to create another.
Of course, the narrative changes all the time. The talking points change. Just look at how global warming turned into climate change to account for extreme weather events, because obviously not it wasn't the whole planet that was warming. Some places became colder, arguably, but yeah, so this is changing again. Now it changes constantly. Once a talking point outlives its usefulness, it gets replaced.
Good.
Yeah.
Let me share some comments from our audience. Is Ezekiel
We saw that.
from Peru?
We saw that.
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning, Alvarez Diaz. Another one here, please.
Good morning again.
Good morning again. He said that 55% of the world energy production is natural gas, and so
25%. He corrected that to 25%. I think that's probably right. And then you have another, 30% or 40% is oil. And altogether, you get the fossil fuels providing 82% of primary energy consumption globally, which is essentially the same percentage it was 25 years ago. And that's after we've, been spent, I don't know how many trillions of dollars in subsidies for all these alternatives. So it just kind of proves the point of last week's episode 69, when we talked about the fact that we're not having an energy transition at all, but an energy addition and adaptation. And
and David, it's important to make the difference between primary energies and the electrical grid energies. It's totally different, no?
Right, sure. But, even when you talk about electric grid, what percentage of that is generated by fossil fuels? It's probably close to 80% and globally. And so, it's just, and I suspect in 2050, when we're supposed to be at net zero, that percentage is going to be largely unchanged. And it's just because our demand grows at such a rapid pace that these renewables that Larry Fink wants to subsidize with his investors' cash, can't keep up with growth. And I mean, it's not their fault, but and I suppose this diversification of energy sources is good. I mean, eventually we all have to recognize that eventually we are going to reach peak oil sometime down the road, probably in the 23rd century sometime. And, at that point, we really will need alternatives to all this. But we're just throwing so much good money after bad alternatives. It's really depressing and probably ultimately is going to create an economic calamity globally. And, and no one seems to want to talk about that reality.
Mm-hmm. Let me share another comment. Interesting discussion. Keep it up. Thank you.
Progress over perfection. Oh, I like that. There you go. That's a good one. That's a great hashtag. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me change a little bit, because there are 2 points that media is putting for us today. Sun protection. No, tell me, sun
Blocking.
Yeah, blocking.
Sun blocking.
And another one is Irina, I suppose, wrote an article about that. It's a huge 23% increase of oil demand for 2030 by OPEC, and the contrary, international agency reducing the projections. Let's talk a little bit about this, Tim.
Go ahead, Irina. You go.
Well, that's nothing new. OPEC expects higher oil demand, and the IEA expects lower oil demand because it wants it to be this way. Well, OPEC wants it to be its way, but I think OPEC is more realistic, as usual. It's not driven so much by ideology. But I just read yet another interview of Fatih Birol this week with the BBC saying that we must stop using oil and gas. I don't know how he doesn't get tired of repeating the same thing over and over again, even if nothing happens. But he had to admit that this winter in Europe will be a tough one if winter is harsh, meaning if winter is normal in Europe, energy prices will go up because the price of gas will go up, surprisingly. But I actually wanted to return to the point Tammy made about pension funds because it got me thinking. Really, a lot of people keep their savings, retirement savings in these pension funds. And if these pension funds go out of hydrocarbons and put their money into industries that are almost entirely dependent on government subsidies, what happens? No government can subsidize these industries as heavily as it does right now forever.
Yeah.
But do you suppose that OPEC countries produce with ESG drivers?
Well, they
yeah.
do have plans. Yeah, and Saudi Arabia wants very, very much
Yeah,
to
careful, yeah.
diversify into metals and minerals, for example. And yeah, they do have contingency plans. I mean, they've learned an important lesson from the last two downturns.
Social protection and
Yeah.
governance.
Yeah,
All
if
the
they want to
national
keep
oil
their standards
companies,
low.
yeah. I mean, Aramco and all the national oil companies have their own sustainability reports and ESG metrics, and they're all playing by the same game. They know they have to avoid being attacked by the far left, and so they do it. And again, it's producing positive benefits for societies and the environment, and so that part of it's fine. It's just the method behind the madness that is really counterproductive for society. I guess that's all I want to say about that.
Let me share another comment, a long comment. Please, David, you are...
Oh, okay. 65% of electricity generation from fossil fuels. Thank you. Yeah, I overstated that. And here's a great point in this comment. All the progress made on increase of renewables were offset by an equivalent reduction of nuclear. And yet 770 million people without any access to reliable electricity. Look, if we're ever to have any hope of getting to any kind of a net zero solution, the only viable alternative to fossil fuels and electricity generation is nuclear, period. And that's always going to be the case. And so until the same people who are pushing these renewables that are not workable and do not have the ability to displace fossil fuels, until those same activists relent on fighting against nuclear growth, we're never going to get to that solution, period. End of discussion. And the Democratic Party in the United States, and I'm sure liberal parties in Europe and Canada, are entirely beholden to that green lobby and funded by that green lobby. And so long as that green lobby maintains this anti-nuclear advocacy, those political parties are going to bend to that will. And we're never going to get to any sort of net zero solution. That is the bottom line in all of this. If you want to displace fossil fuels, you have to grow nuclear, and I don't care what else you try to do. Nothing else is going to get it done. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, but petrochemical you cannot replace with nuclear.
No, we're always, yeah.
But see, that oil for petrochemicals would come from Saudi Arabia. So this is the SOP to the Middle East,
Right.
where they're entirely dependent on oil and gas, and they're like, okay, well, we'll get that oil from you guys, but everybody else in the West, which are private oil companies, like the Chevrons and the Exxons or whatever, they're going to go under, and we're going to be net zero, and whatever petrochemicals we may allow to be used, because there's all these bans on plastics and whatnot, that will come from the Middle East. That'll be the last barrel. And what bothers me is that when we're diverting investment like this towards a certain agenda, you're depriving investment from certain innovations that could be taking place. And what a lot of this is you have committees making decisions on where money ought to go, whether it's government committees or whatever, and as if they've ever innovated anything. And so where you could be getting innovation, they're going to waste money on solar geoengineering or these ridiculous plans to beam solar power from space to Earth. I mean, I've talked to some experts in the field and they say, well, this is just grant farming, well, oh, sure. Politicians want to hear this. So yeah, we can do it. Give us some money, give us a couple million and we'll see what we can do. And then that advances their career. And I wanted to also make a point about the ESG rating companies, because that was one of the big complaints was, Tesla's ranked lower than these other companies or whatever.
R.J. Reynolds, Philip Morris, all the tobacco companies. Yeah.
Right, but they do it based on industry. So a tobacco industry will be rated differently, say, than an automotive manufacturer, and there's issues in the supply chain and so on. But there's over 30 different major ESG rating companies. So, and they all have different methodologies, which are rather murky. So it's very difficult to determine how exactly are you arriving at that score. They say, oh, well, this and this, and people are looking for the easy thing, right? Oh, they have an A or a B minus, or maybe sometimes they do it out of 100. Sometimes it's out of 5. I mean, it's all different. So what the EU is doing is they want to mandate the methodology and criteria to have only one. And one of the things that's coming out of the ISSB stuff is the United Nations Net Zero Data Public Utility. So all of that data is going to be put into one UN-run database that everyone can use. So I think from there, the UN and the international community is going to have one type of ESG rating system, and it's going to be based on that UN data.
Great. Let's let Antonio Guterres run the system. What could
run it?
possibly
Well,
go
it's
wrong?
Emmanuel Macron and Bloomberg. Just set it on fire. I don't know, a riot in Paris.
Investments in nuclear and CCUS seem to be the only available path to achieve emission reduction targets at large scale. Thank you, Rodrigo. That's very astute and I think 100% correct. Yeah.
Okay. Let me share with you, please, a comment that I'm not sure that I can show this one. I received from a person. I cannot tell who sent to me this.
I sent that one. So they'll relabel it governance, environment, and social. So GAS for short, gaslighting. Really,
how about GES from gaslighting, envy, and stupidity?
Oh,
that's
my
brilliant,
God.
actually.
Brilliant. We're branding the name. People, thank you so much. It was a fantastic conversation today. Yes.
Thank you.
We had too much fun.
Yes.
I don't think Mr. Fink's going to like it, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
It's good to laugh
have a
about
good
it.
week for you too.
All right. Y'all have a great
Have
week.
a great week.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye. Thanks everyone for
Bye.
your comments.
Yeah, thanks so much.